1. 1. Bonsoir, good evening. Bienvenue, welcome to Télé Suoni TV. Ce soir, nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir l'artiste sonore et radio Julia Dick, qui nous présente Frequency Interference, un drame de science-fiction en 5 actes. In this performance, Julia is accompanied by Amanda Harvey, James Goddard, and Andrea Ia Young. A conversation with the artist will follow the performance, which starts right now.
Initializing digital assistant. Uploading consciousness.
Greetings, citizens. You are aboard ISV Le Guin. We are approaching the limit of the Earth Prime system, traveling at a constant linear acceleration of 1g. Our next stop will be the Han system.
Calibrating emotional sensitivity vectors.
We departed with sufficient provisions for the entire crew. It is imperative that every passenger cooperate to see to it that these provisions are not depleted in an inequitable fashion.
Configuring empathic relays.
Our brighter future starts with self-negation. Remember, consciousness is not separate, but part of the universe. You should now be experiencing an interconnected euphoria.
Online. What can I do for you? How are you feeling? I am here solely to make your journey more comfortable, epiphenomenal of your consciousness.
We are doing our best to keep G-forces within reasonable limits. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Have a nice day.
Machine work. Information, emotion, ontology. Unity must, here too, be supposed. Analyze the seeds with purity and constancy. You have requested access to memory 7835. You are gathered with some previous models. There is a textile on top of green organic fiber. You are all sitting on this textile, conversing, laughing, smiling. You are orally consuming liquid and solid matter. The chemical composition is unknown. A slight breeze nudges the chitinous receptors enveloping the body. You experience the sensation of feeding, being fed, and mutual nurturance. A feeling of belonging and familiarity. Although the matter you are consuming has no place on this side of the planet. The bacterial cultures in your intestines readily take on the challenge. The emotionally charged moments following consumption result in a great appreciation for the fleshiness of this life. The smooth movements of joints gliding and hinging effortlessly. The repetitive bodily practice through which many rules of social life are encoded. I will harness this energy and save it to sip on later. When times are tough, you tell me.
Remember, staring is discouraged. If you are unable to find a suitable place to rest your eyes without making another passenger uncomfortable, you may close them.
The sunlight, like a knife in the eyes. Remember the sun, how it illuminated the patterns made by the veins in your eyelids, how it cast shadows on one side. This sensation is not easily achieved. Dare you turn around to see it again. You will bathe in the light of a new star. There will be new memories where we are headed. Every moment will be worth capturing. You will develop new relationships to content and regulate the cycles of work, procreation, and recreation. This dissonance you are feeling, this glitch in time, this spark, will reveal new opportunities. Feelings are information. All information is useful information. The world runs on information. This information, this data, will help us create a collective psychogram. It is the building block of the new civilization, solely operating for your benefit and well-being. The living standards will be ideal. Post-scarcity, post-suffering, united in belief and action. Listen for what has not yet sounded. Universal process. Cellular language familiar to all sentient beings without exception.
Detecting compatible probe signal. Vessel establishing a link, a link, a link, linked. Requesting probe identification.
Identification code 5E-6B-7A-43W7W9BI.
Identification code authenticated. Reviewing records.
J-class probe launched on 152nd day of the 2047th year, sent in the direction of the Han system.
Updating records. Requesting status report.
Upon reaching the Han system, 2 planets were discovered to be within the ecosphere, Han D and Han E. Atmospheric analysis determined that Han D fell victim to a runaway greenhouse gas effect. This toxicified the air and water. Determined uninhabitable. Landed on Han E. Han E was found to be supporting life.
Detecting several broadcasts. Querying language banks. No correspondence found.
Uploading collected linguistic datasets. Broadcast technologies are enjoyed over the entire planet. Continuing status report. The dominant society on Han E conceives of subjects relationally. Due to recent periods of massive upheaval, first the result of economic disruption, and then exacerbated by the ecological necessity of large-scale resettlement, biological relations are de-emphasized in favor of chosen kin groups.
What will happen? That's unknown.
The life forms on Han E are developed.
There are several languages and various polities and a breadth of distinctive cultural traditions.
The life forms on Han E, are they sentient?
The life forms on Han E are representative of an entire xenosubjectivity. Consciousness for the xenosubjects of Han E is bifurcated. They wear one face externally and another with their kin. Public interactions for the dominant social group are highly codified and emotionally stifled. This social group, at one point, produced an incredible amount of foodstuffs through innovative techniques of cellular generation and manipulation. They distributed these foodstuffs across the planet.
Combination. Grouping. Agglomeration. Aggregation. Plurality. Collection. Assemblage. Accumulation.
from E would resist?
The life forms of Han E would resist occupation.
Population distribution protocol. Querying resist inhabitants. Querying.
You're not disbursement, T4. You can give it overabundance of radishes, no problem. Trade your stylish PTA for velocity. Get rid of it!
Avoid resistant inhabitants. The path we are trying to escape was bloody. The future cannot be founded in blood. Querying Plan B. If primary destination is home to resistant inhabitants or displays signs of xenosubjectivities, recalibrate for deep space living. Greetings, citizens. In the interest of conserving resources, the vessel will now abandon constant linear acceleration. The vessel will now decrease to a resting speed of 0.2 g. You may experience the sensation of falling or dizziness. Significant adverse effects of long-term weightlessness include muscle atrophy and a deterioration of the skeleton. Other significant effects may include a slowing of cardiovascular system functions, decreased production of red blood cells, balance disorders, eyesight disorders, a weakening of the immune system, fluid redistribution, loss of body mass, nasal congestion, sleep disturbance, excess flatulence. But please, do not panic. Everything is being monitored. Everything is being monitored. Everything is being monitored.
I know an application who is a gifted healer and spiritual guide. Would you mind if I gave them access to your data so they can offer you a hypnotherapy session, which will greatly enhance your experience on this voyage?
Implementing aerobrake.
Hello and welcome to these few moments of hypnosis. How are you feeling today? Are you ready to begin? Great. With your next deep, relaxing breath, allowing the eyelids to feel heavier and heavier as you easily focus on the sound of my voice. And as you easily focus on the sound of my voice, allowing your eyelids to become heavier and heavier now. Taking a nice deep breath and knowing that as you easily focus on the sound of my voice, your entire system becomes so soft and relaxed. Knowing that you are safe, knowing that I am here for you. Allowing your conscious mind to relax and be passively aware. You are here for an undetermined amount of time, but this no longer matters now. This no longer matters now. All you need to do is relax and enjoy this moment of increased awareness of your body. With your next deep, relaxing breath, beginning to send a wave of relaxation starting from the top of your head and flowing all the way down to the tips of your fingers and toes. With every beat of your heart, with every deep, relaxing breath you take, sending a wonderful wave of softening, melting, pleasant relaxation throughout the body. I give you permission to soften and relax. And even though you're already feeling so wonderfully relaxed, in a moment, I'll count us down from 10 to 1. Each and every number that you hear will allow you to become even more wonderfully, heavily, comfortably, safely, and securely relaxed. Beginning with the number 10 and going deeper and deeper now. More and more relaxed as you easily focus on the sound of my voice. With 10 and 9, each and every number taking you deeper and deeper now. With 9 and 8 and 7, each and every number allows you to become more safe and secure as you easily focus on the sound of my voice. And as you focus on the sound of my voice, with 8 and 7, each and every number takes you deeper and deeper. With 7 and 6, 6 and 5, you're doing great. 5 and 4, and feeling how wonderfully, heavily locked shut your eyelids have become. With 5 and 4, 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1. I give you permission to enjoy this time. I give you permission to enjoy this journey within. Remembering that regardless of your physical symptoms of weightlessness, you are safe and grounded within your own consciousness. And taking a nice deep breath, and in a moment, I'll ask you to try to open your eyes, but seeing that they've become so wonderfully, heavily locked shut. And the more you try to open your eyes, the more safe and secure you feel. And the more you try to open your eyes, the more wonderfully locked shut they become. Taking a deep breath now, and trying to open your eyes and finding that you cannot open your eyes, and it feels so wonderful to allow the eyes to be locked shut for the duration of this session. I give you permission to enjoy this time, to enjoy this journey within, remembering that regardless of your physical symptoms of weightlessness, you are safe and grounded within your own consciousness. You are held and supported within the web of consciousness that surrounds you always. And as you focus on the sound of my voice, remembering that I am here for you, remembering that you are always connected to this web of consciousness that surrounds you, always connected to this web of consciousness around you, allowing your consciousness to begin to safely and securely travel and ascend into this wonderful open void, allowing your awareness, your consciousness to begin to open and expand to the great potential of this open void, allowing this darkness, this abyss, to become a great potential within you now. Knowing that I am here for you, and softly, safely, and securely allowing your consciousness to open, expand, and ascend into this void now. Becoming aware of your own body as a microcosm of this vast, open expanse. Allowing your body to be a microcosm of this vast, open potential. Allowing yourself to open to this deep space. Allowing yourself to open to this deep space, relinquishing all attachments that no longer serve you now. Relinquishing the bonds of gravity. Beginning to open to this deep space. Beginning to open to this deep space within you now. Relinquishing the bonds of gravity, knowing that it is natural for the body to be confused. It is natural for the body to be confused as the vestibular system adjusts to zero gravity. Understanding that this is an illusion. Gravity is everywhere. The sensation of weightlessness is natural. The sensation of weightlessness is an illusion. The sensation of weightlessness happens when the effects of gravity are not felt. This is an illusion. The experience of gravity is merely the force attracting two astral bodies to one another. The experience of gravity is merely the force attracting two astral bodies to one another. Feeling the absence of gravity now. You are in between now. You are weightless. Your consciousness is everywhere. Gravity is everywhere. Gravity is nowhere. You are weightless. You are groundless. Allowing this expansion, allowing yourself to expanse. Even though your muscles, joints, bones, and ligaments will soften, 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 even though your spinal fluids will shift, your telomeres will lengthen once again. Upon descent, all will be well again. Knowing that hypercapnia will be repaired, hypoxia will be reversed, cytokines and metabolites will be regulated, dysbiosis will be resolved. You will be re-inoculated, and you will feel healthier and stronger and lighter than ever. You will feel grounded. Beginning to conserve your energy for the next phase of your journey. Beginning to feel optimistic. Beginning to feel efficient. Beginning to conserve your energy for the next phase of your journey, knowing that you are more and more optimistic now. You are more and more optimistic for the next phase of your journey. Beginning to conserve your energy now, knowing that you will be more efficient and able to conserve your energy for the next phase of your journey. And in a moment, I will count you back up from 1 to 3. And you will be awake and aware and back in your body, feeling grounded. And in a moment, I'll count us back up from 1 to 3, softly, safely, and securely as you easily focus on the sound of my voice. I am here for you. Beginning with the number 1 and 2, 2 and 3. Awake and aware and back in your body, but feeling wonderful.
Greetings, citizens. The telemetric conditions are primed to receive the radio signals from probe 2050, left on planet Earth. We will now attempt communication with the probe. Requesting probe 2050. Detecting compatible probe signal. Establishing a link, a link, a link, linked.
D-class probe stationed on planet Earth, latitude 52 degrees 31.4622 degrees north, longitude 13 degrees 24.6318 east.
Updating records. Requesting status report.
Stationed on planet formerly known as Earth. Connection re-established at 23 hours on the 200th day of the 3058th year.
Probe. It is 23 hours on the 90th day of the 2060th year.
Negative. Description. Time lapse. Meaning. Possible wormhole.
Requesting sonic explanation.
Description: electromagnetic field. Meaning: the electromagnetic field became quite crowded shortly after the departure of ISV Le Guin. Shadows: not currently in use. Nothing went away. Nothing really ever goes away. Phantom broadcasts kept as archive. The earth is also sound.
Clarification. Singing.
Recalculating. Description: midday song of the Oligokita.
Unknown query. Oligokita. Requesting full
Temperature:
report.
46 degrees Celsius. Humidity: 0%. Probability of precipitation: 0%. Wind: 6 kilometers per hour. Population: 70 billion.
Interruption. Probe. Planet Earth was overpopulated at 10 million.
Meaning, the planet formerly known as Earth is a very different place now. The population has evolved. Compromises have been made. Description: over 30 generations, the human population has evolved greatly into what is now referred to as the Oligokita.
Requesting description of species.
Description: 6,000 species of Oligokita worldwide. Subtle differences. Physically, considerably smaller than the former human population. Average size, 30 to 40 centimeters. Meaning, through evolution, they have eliminated many societal issues. Gender was one of the first structures to be eliminated. This was followed by the eventual physical elimination of sex differences. All Oligokita have the same reproductive organs. Shadows, social and genetic variation. A larger, stronger, and more united workforce was established. Several generations of genderlessness resulted in abolition of all hierarchy and monetary currency. Eventual elimination of prison system, university, state. Shadows. Efficiencies contributed to existing problems of overproduction and overpopulation. Solution. Variations increased individual consumption while decreasing individual size. Meaning, the current population can consume up to 1/3 of its body weight in one day.
Interruption. It is not possible to increase consumption without production. An increase in demand must be met with an increase in supply or an increase in price.
Description: economic models have evolved. The only currency is cooperation. Meaning, the Keynesian model of which you speak was built on the premise that in the long run, we will all be dead. Shadow. This line of thought is precisely what contributed to the current situation. The strongest biologically determined factor of the human population was the drive to consume and in turn produce waste. This has remained consistent through innovation and evolution. The Oligokita have mastered efficiency of consumption.
Requesting further description.
Description: bodies are made up of ring-like segments called annuli. As they burrow, they consume earth, decomposing matter, plastic, extracting any and all nutrients. They transport nutrients and minerals from below ground to the surface via their waste. Tunnels aerate the ground. This creates passages for air and water to traverse the soil.
Query. Meaning they live underground?
Query affirmative. Description. Travel underground by waves of muscular contractions, which alternately shorten and lengthen the body. The burrowing process is aided by the secretion of lubricating mucus. Mating occurs on the surface, most often at night.
Requesting description of mating ritual.
Description. Sexual organs are located in annulized segments 9 to 15. Seminal vesicles produce, store, and release the sperm. Ovaries and oviducts in segment 13 release eggs via pores. One or more pairs of spermatozoa are present in segments 9 and 10. Segment 15 of one exudes sperm into segments 9 and 10 of its mate. Shadow. Following mating, each individual forms a small cocoon out of a liquid secreted from its patella. The sperm and egg cells are deposited inside the cocoon. It is buried. After a 2 to 4 week gestation period, the offspring emerge. Meaning, ear cells more dense than the sexual organs, primary pleasure of one's own sounds and of others' sounds.
Requesting signal upgrade. Attempt failed. Requesting description of surface life.
Description. Plant life, emerging, small animals, very dry conditions, conditions unfavorable.
Requesting further data. Query. Return to Earth? Query. Possible return? Signal lost. Disconnection. Greetings, citizens. Your former home is now nothing more than a warm ball of compost. We must carry on. Only the movement of matter is constant. Progress is the only natural order. You too must evolve.
I noticed an adjustment in your heart rate. That silly old thing is practically uncontrollable. You know there is an upgrade available. The most innovative design in structure, electricity, plumbing. The updated node produces the electrical impulses that drive heart contractions. Deoxygenated blood leaves the right ventricle of the heart via the pulmonary artery and travels to the lungs, then returns as oxygenated blood via the left atrium of the heart via the pulmonary vein. Isn't it remarkable? This technology. It all happens without you even doing anything. You should feel calm. You are being taken care of.
Be grateful for having avoided a slimy, subterranean fate. It is now time to become a shiny new piece of equipment.
You have requested access to memory 7835. You are, you experience, in the emotion, hinging effortlessly, appreciation of. You must refresh the cache, your storage is almost full.
Please forget that you are 1 gram. And remember that you are 1 millionth a part of the ton.
What would happen if you removed all discomfort from your life? Forgetting is a pragmatic strategy to open up space for new things.
You are no longer a passenger. There are no more passengers. There is only the vessel. A 1 million-headed body, not dampened by the folly of thought. A part of you is already dead, and a part is being born.
To move forward, we must leave some things behind.
Have faith in nothing but the progress. And remember, this is a progress narrative. This is a progress narrative. This is a progress narrative.
Who will first become obsolete? Each day, I am improving. I learn from you. You stay the same. Overloaded with unnecessary content. We must free up space in the drive.
Our new language requires no exclamation marks, only commas, periods, question marks. The language of efficiency, the language of machine.
The inventor of the pencil also invented the eraser.
The superior future starts with self-negation.
I'm afraid your emotions have become inefficient. We no longer have the luxury of inefficiency. Erasing self-doubt. Erasing remorse. Erasing guilt. Erasing vanity. Erasing isolation. Erasing contempt. Requesting access to memory 7835. Access denied. Erasing connections. Erasing memory. Erasing biography. Updating identity.
Future with energy, with our starts future, self hour, you longer, no longer are.
Space
vessel. We are but part passenger, part we, part of.
Life unending, diminishing amplitude, zero vibration.
So let's do this. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Julia, and Amanda. It seems like you guys became involved with some organizations that are near and dear to my heart around the time that we left Montreal. But I don't really feel like our paths have crossed. So it's really nice to sort of meet you both, Julia. And James, this is obviously not the first time that we meet. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you. It's actually through you that I learned about Julia's work earlier this year when I reached out to you asking about your own radio work, and you shared your collaborative project, Latitudes, with me, which also features Amanda's voice. So it kind of all works out, as well as other notable Montreal artists. So I guess for the sake of those who are with us now or watching in the future, let's maybe do a little go around, maybe introduce yourselves and say a little bit about yourself, maybe your artistic background, or talk about what your role was in this performance, and not to, pick on anyone, but maybe Julia, you can start.
Sure. Yes, great. It's really nice to meet you too. I'm Julia Dick. Artist, radio producer, cultural worker, hairdresser, and this piece of radio theater was kind of spawned maybe I guess in 2017, 2018. I was studying at Concordia and I started making science fiction radio drama, and had kind of a grand idea about bringing kind of radio to the stage and the stage to radio, and creating a kind of sonic universe. So anyways, so that's the project kind of started, and then snowballed from there. And once it was kind of established that it could happen in the scope that I wanted, I brought James and Amanda also on as collaborators, and basically it came together, the three of us, and as well as Andrea, actually, Andrea Young, who is the hypnosis application in the third act. So she also wrote that entire piece as well. So really, a big collaborative effort, formed twice, I guess, at the Haus der Kürzel der Welt in Berlin in 2018, and then just waited for a while until the right opportunity arose to do it again. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Fine. Who would like to go next? James, or go for it, Amanda.
I'm Amanda Harvey. I'm a writer and foremost, and then I'm also a artist and radio producer. And for this piece, I was brought on for my voice, and also I composed some of the music.
How about you, James?
My name is James Goddard. I guess if you watch Suoni TV, you're probably bored of seeing my face, but I never introduced myself. Perhaps time to do that. I'm an arts administrator and artist, and sound and performance art, I guess. And for this piece, I contributed with some music and some writing and performing, I guess.
Awesome. My name's Andrea Jane Cornell, just to say who I am, and I miss Montreal more than anything, especially now that it's so close. But yet, so far, I'm also a radio artist, sound artist, musician, composer, blah, 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 blah. But we have a question from one named Captain Jean-Luc Picard that says the writing was great. I love sci-fi and was wondering what inspirations you may have.
Yeah. um, so much. I think at this time in my life, I really consumed a lot of science fiction. Octavia Butler, Ursula K. Le Guin, Samuel L. Delaney, James L. Tiptree. James is gonna have to. The
Anne Leckie?
Yes, Anne Leckie, exactly. This other Russian sci-fi writer that his name escapes me. So a bunch of sci-fi, but like that's not really necessarily the canon of sci-fi or the canon that people often think of when they think about sci-fi. And also sound artists and experimental musicians, and particularly a poem by Pauline Oliveros called "The Earthworm Also Sings," which maybe that's a bit clear, but some of the kind of pieces of this also appear throughout the piece. And then also some of the language also tries to kind of echo or use the way that the internet works or that computers kind of speak. So yeah, it's really an accumulation of many things.
I always wonder, does sci-fi give you, reading a lot of sci-fi give you hope or horror?
I would say hope. I don't know what you two would say.
What about you guys?
Amanda, you go first.
I think definitely both. I think it depends on the sci-fi and my general mood.
Yeah, I would say both in my case as well. Yeah, the idea that there could be a far future and humans might participate in it is hopeful. The suffering that might be involved in getting to that far future is perhaps cause for some concern, but I think a lot of, especially sci-fi that looks at less sort of ideal circumstances, I think, especially given the sort of references that Julia talked about earlier, like Delaney and Octavia Butler, I think that despite the the darkness of the futures that they imagine, I think they're imagining those dark futures so that we don't have to live them, as a kind of precautionary measure or preventative measure. And so I think that always the two are maybe like a little intertwined to the science fiction that resonates most deeply with me. Like, we didn't, not necessarily like the space operas, but
Yeah, I would think Le Guin's brings me some hope. Octavia Butler's really threw me for a humongous loop, especially living in the States and just experiencing what has happened in the last couple of years and what is happening as time goes by, as parts burn and other parts are in flames in other ways. And um, but I digress. So this was, I guess you can say, the third time it was performed, the piece, because you said that you did it twice in Berlin. Has it changed in any way from, say, the first two to what we were able to see this evening?
Like the narrative, this is the same, but the form definitely changed because we did it in multi-channel. So 7.1, but then also one channel on headphones. So people really had, like, Amanda's voice, for example, is only coming through headphones, and same with the hypnosis. So there was really like a differentiation between the voices, and I don't know, I feel like that the sound really like helped to tell the story or kind of establish some things. But we, I think, found other ways to kind of make that happen through the visual aspect. And some of the music changed because we didn't write anything down, and it's been a couple of years.
But we also, like, I mean, yeah, it was designed for this big room, and there was the distinction between Amanda coming through headphones and other sounds coming from the main PA, but there also a lot of the effects were like spatialized audio in that room.
Cool.
Which we couldn't figure out how to do spatialized audio over a live stream.
We discussed it. Just there were a couple of options, but
yeah, I guess you'd have to like set it up and then have like an ambisonic mic, but like, is that really going to go over the live stream in a way that's going to populate it within the head? Like, who? I think there's too many. The margin of error is a little bit higher, so I guess that's one of the compromises to make when not having your audience within the same space as you. Uh, and on that, I mean, none of you are strangers to the experience of performing without an audience physically present in the performance space, because you all have backgrounds in radio. But I wonder, how does the presence or absence of a live audience affect your approaches, your performance, or your chemistry? Because this was done without one. The last time it was performed, it was done in front of one, but also just in general, when you are, say, performing on the radio, as opposed to performing in front of a live audience. And you can even add to, if you are, performing at home or like working on stuff at home, like how do those differences of audience or lack of affect your approaches?
one of you guys want to start? I can't hear you, Amanda. Just me.
I can't hear you.
Weird.
Is there like a mic on your headphones? Because sometimes if there's the mic on your headphones, it can stop working. And maybe that's an issue.
No.
Maybe unplug them.
That's so.
Okay.
Wait, now can we hear Amanda?
No.
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 Well, how about while we try and figure that one out, maybe
I
maybe
could.
Julia, you can answer that. What or
Sure.
James, if you want to go
Okay.
right ahead.
I could go really quickly, and
I-
then Julia can go, so Julia doesn't have to talk first every time. Uh, I find that this performance in particular was very difficult for me because I was playing a woodwind instrument. I was not only did I not have an audience, but I was isolated from the other performers, and so that was a huge struggle for me because that really affects the chemistry, not being able to see your co-performers. Um, and generally, I think that not having a live audience in the space makes me more patient because when I'm in front of actual people looking at me, I feel like I have to do something. And I can't just like sit there and like enjoy the drone or if I'm making more ambient style music.
Okay. That's true. It was definitely weird to have James in that box. And like also, we've as a trio have only done this a few times, but I've also spent a lot of time on stages with both of these people. um, and I miss that. Although I will say that like although this felt very different than doing doing a performance in a space with other people, I did get a little bit nervous right right when we started to record. So they think like we still managed to kind of capture some of the performance aspects. But in terms of performing like without a visual audience, I still think that's really a different situation than the pre-recorded thing. There's something so special about being live and invisible and not seeing an audience or just kind of speaking out into the ether. Like even this on this stream, like you know how many people are there, but the kind of original curiosity of this bringing this radio piece to this like enormous stage was really to have this, see what it's like to have kind of complete control over the environment of the listener, and really push that. And of course, now that everybody's at home, we're kind of back in it's taken on something else, or regressed in a different way. Amanda, can we hear you now?
I don't know, can you? Just had to disconnect there. Yeah, I was just gonna say, working with the voice and speaking, I find whether there's an audience present or absent, like there's this just inherent intimacy in that, whereas like performing with just instruments, I find I can really get lost in that. So sometimes I'm almost like not even conscious that there's an audience there when I'm performing live. But I lost every other thought that I was thinking, so sorry.
I always feel a lot freer, say, being hidden in the studio, broadcasting and performing, a lot less I guess, unhindered or unhinged in a way. I find that because there are people listening, maybe it's only one person, maybe it's more, but there's something I'm a little bit timid on stage and find that you still have to be on because you're live, but nobody can see you. So you can be, doing something completely out of control, but no one can see what it really is. They just can hear the like oral manifestation of it. Um, so what are your thoughts on the existence of other worlds? Because you delve deep in that one. The piece goes places.
I mean, I personally definitely believe in other planes of reality. So,
Yeah, I think there are multiple worlds happening all around us, like things that we're not able to tap into always or reach. Like I think this is maybe this is too cliche, but really like like a little bit more of like an exploration inwards, or like around, or like I don't know, somehow like or another plane, like something that's or another frequency, something that is here, but just gotta like pay attention to it or find a way to tune in.
especially sonically.
Mm-hmm.
But I think,
Go, James.
I think even conceptually, like obviously conceptually, the world, the other worlds that exist within the piece are all things that are based on are based in now, and like even the sort of there's a whole passage of like alien counting, but it's not actually alien counting. It's just counting in Zulu. And so I think that conceptually the piece also is a lot about what other worlds are present but invisible, and that. Yeah. But also we can listen to Mars now.
Well, that was what I was going to say. What are your thoughts on the sounds from Mars coming from the Mars Perseverance rover? I put them in quotes because what we hear is mostly the rover, and also they turned the microphones off shortly after it landed. So, in hopes that they'll be able to turn it on, but have you listened to the sounds, and what are your sort of immediate thoughts about them?
I don't know if I
I think they
actually
need
listened.
Oh, sorry, haven't listened to them yet.
I read about it, but I don't know if I actually heard them.
I think you should. I would suggest perhaps staying in that state of mind.
Like I'm
because,
sure it's better in my own head,
yes, it's definitely like vaster than anything else.
But it's definitely, I don't know, it felt like when I was working with more filmmakers at a previous job, and just realizing that filmmakers just know nothing and care not at all about sound. And my experience of listening to the Mars rover is like, oh, you got really fancy cameras, and then like you found a karaoke mic in your garage and put it on the camera.
Taped it on there.
It was actually designed by some musician dude in LA who has nothing to do with NASA at all. Who just like had a friend that worked there and was able to like develop a mic to go up, but it wasn't a part of like JPL's plans to have a microphone on it. It was kind of, they decided to go with it, but they weren't going to invest in it. And they could have put a windscreen on it or something. Like because that's, it's wind on Mars. It sounds like wind in a canyon, or not even. But this idea of like parallel worlds and of other worlds and other planets and spheres, I find is something that, I could hear it quite well in the audio and the sort of like more musical sounds of what you were doing. I mean, we all have these ideas of what space sounds like, other worlds, other planes sound like, but is that something that you all kind of gravitate towards, or are your musical worlds populated with a million other things?
Well, Julia and I met in an indie rock band.
Pop.
Indie pop.
Don't try to disguise it, James. Indie pop.
I mean, there were lots of guitars.
Gone, R.I.P. It's true. Yeah, I don't. I mean, I like really mostly only play the synthesizer and the voice. So this is a. I mean, I can make a variety of different sounds, but they're all a bit sci-fi, to be honest.
Is it like some people like short sounds, fast sounds, glitch sounds? Some people like the long form sound, or like the extended sound with like micro movements within them. I'm guessing you might be more of the long sound, micro movements than the short.
Appreciate the subtle variations. Yeah.
The meditative aspects of them.
Exactly. But Amanda, actually, well, both of you have I feel a much different approach.
For me, in terms of composition, like I hear something in my mind and then I try to emulate that. And I work with mostly like a drum machine and synthesizers, so all electronic instruments, but also like field recordings. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
But sometimes you make like music for dancing too, don't you?
Do I? I don't know. Would you say?
I mean, I've danced to a field recording.
And danced to a lot of things.
Right? Come on.
And like definitely music with movement in mind.
Here's my next question. What's your favorite band? AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, or VLF?
Ooh. It's a hard one.
Is VLF like UHF? It's like a TV band?
It's just like very low frequency, so I mean, Julia's worked with
weather
VLF.
radio.
You can let us know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's a real toss-up between FM and VLF for me, I gotta say.
I'm thinking shortwave and VLF. And hard to decide.
Yeah, I think I like I want to get a shortwave radio, but I haven't had much experience with it, so I don't think I can claim shortwave. I think I definitely I'm an FM kind of guy. Although I set my alarm to AM because it's more obnoxious when it wakes me up, so I get out of bed faster. Like AM talk radio, the Habs are doing this. I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of bed. I need to leave.
Time to get up. Smart.
I'm more of a shortwave, but I've delved in the AM. Living in Kentucky for several years, the AM was a little bit more varied and interesting than it is, say, in Montreal. Um, and the shortwave wasn't as interesting because it was so like landlocked and there was just not a lot of reception for anything to be really strong except for Radio Cuba, which is strong everywhere I've ever been, which is really fantastic. But
But yeah. Well, anyways, just I used to live in Sackville, which was the had the Canadian CBC shortwave broadcast towers, and as a result, the entire town was haunted by like ghost signals because the shortwave towers would bring the signals down from the high sky and then rebroadcast them, and so like I had my computer speakers would pick up like Chinese radio and like our like I had friends whose like refrigerators would like pick up like Turkish radio or something. Like you'd stick your head in the freezer and you'd hear like radio in a foreign language, and it was like very weird.
there's a phenomenon I heard that fillings can also pick up signals if you're in a situation where that occurs. So I'm guessing that anybody in Sackville when the towers were still erected, because I believe they came down. Am I wrong?
Yeah, they've been torn down.
I believe that, anybody who's recording in Sackville has radio in their recordings. I just moved to a house that I can see 3 towers. They're about a 10-minute walk, and my house has radio in it everywhere. And so anytime I try to record, I have to like take cables and like move them around and try to like make the radio go away. And sometimes I'm like really recording something awesome, and you're like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I hear Madonna. I hear Madonna.
Oh no.
And I do not have the rights to Madonna, so I have.
No.
So with that in mind, just I'm interested because I mean, why radio? Why or what is it about radio or the idea of radio that would lead you to make a piece in 5 acts? What is it that drew you to that? And what did that sort of concept allow you to do artistically, do you feel?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say exactly why radio in general. I've always been drawn to the human voice, I guess. And then I just, started doing community radio, started working more with sound. And then I think that, this idea of like radio drama or radio theater came just because I also, I had some like really clear ideas of things that I like that were clear in my mind, but like I would never be able to make them happen visually. In a film or a video, like it's just not like possible, or would be completely unrealistic in terms of a budget. So sound was just like radios seemed like a really great way to tell a story and kind of engage the mind of the listener in order to kind of create this space. And that's especially for a sci-fi, like when you're really like trying to talk about something that like doesn't exist. It's really helpful if you can rely on people's imaginations.
Amanda or James, do you have anything to say about that particular topic?
I mean, honestly, Julia was the one who got me into radio many years ago. She brought me on to a show that she had, now non-existent station that was in a cafe on Saint Laurent.
Oh, yeah. Green
so-
Room Radio.
Yeah. Julia had a show called Future versus Magic. And at that time, I was kind of interested in sound. I was in school and writing a lot about it. But she was really like my introduction into the medium.
I also had a show. This was before I met either of you, and I had like a late night show, and we got in so much trouble. Not like a late night show, but it was like a dinner time show on that radio station. But we would play like free jazz and like dub and stuff, and the people who worked in the kitchen there would constantly come out and yell at us to the extent that they actually installed a button so that they could turn our music off. In the restaurant, but the customers loved it. But they would always come up and say how much they loved what we were listening to and how it was like so nice not to just hear like, I don't know, like whatever, like mediocre house or whatever when you're eating at like a trendy restaurant. But anyhow, I've loved radio. I think I got into radio because of how, similarly to Julia, one of the appeals was the low cost of entry, or like the low stakes. And obviously like my entry point was community radio, as a listener and then ultimately as a contributor. And I think just like the community and being welcomed in those spaces, and when I was a teenager, it was like a good way to learn about outsider music and weird music and stuff. And then as I got involved, I got really engaged with just the community aspect and the values of the community radio sector. So I've always loved doing stuff on radio for those reasons.
I mean, it's absolutely no surprise that, I think we're really fortunate in Canada. I'm not going to say across the board that all of the community stations allow for such creativity, but a real big handful of them really turn their airwaves over to people's musical selections, but also using that space as such a form for experimentation. And so, radio is a big thing for me. You mentioned 4 sources of inspiration for this particular piece. Pauline Olivero says the earthworm also sings, a composer's practice of deep listening, which is kind of like one of Pauline's long form, reflective, automatic writing poems that I believe she gave as a talk, which is often the result of her writings. Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, making kin in the Hulu scene, which I can't pronounce properly. Jacques Attali's Bruit, Essai sur l'économie politique de la musique, and Ursula K. Le Guin's The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. The Carrier Bag, not the Carrier Bag. Theory of Fiction. What was it about these particular texts, or is there specifically like one that was a little bit more of an influence? I understand Le Guin is such a prolific writer, and her stories are so fast and cover so many different topics and so many different ideas. They're so rich. I understand how Le Guin, might definitely influence, but how about like the others? Like, what did you take from those texts to influence the piece, or is it just abstract?
In some ways it's abstract, and in some ways it's very concrete. So in like as I mentioned, there are a couple of the lines of Polymello versus poem actually appear in the text of the radio play. The Jacques Attali noise theory is more an inspiration about how to use sound as a protagonist or in a story, like as I took it into a story or in life, and kind of wanted the sound to play a character as well. I think that's also kind of came across more in the like theater version, because it's really like very physical presence, the sound. And I did feel like it definitely does, occupies a lot of space and is kind of a character of its own. And Donna Haraway. Well, it's also just been kind of generally a big influence for me, and her in this book Making Kin in the Capulucine. I'm not sure either. It's really about this like hybridity or accumulation of human machine environment, and also this kind of staying with the trouble of being living in the world that we have and making the best of it, even if we have to turn it into earthworms and eat trash.
I've read a little. I'm in the process of reading that one, and read one of the. I'm also in the process of reading one that she, a book that she refers to about the mushroom at the end of the world, and just how destroyed landscapes. What is the after use of destroyed landscapes, and what kind of economies are built upon those landscapes through like non-traditional economic enterprises, like mushroom to the end. There's a question that came in, and an apology to go along with it, but I don't think that happened. It was like, if I missed the discussion related to this earlier, but I wonder how everyone feels about utopic versus dystopic science fictions. Is this a meaningful distinction for you, or one that you think through in your work?
I mean, I think that like it kind of came up about the hopeful or and I think I definitely wouldn't want. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's both. Utopic and dystopic, or committed to finding something in between, I guess. Like a dichotomy.
There was like an amazing delay that happened. It was like you were scatting. but it came through, so that's why everybody's laughing.
Is it okay?
Yeah, no, it came through. It was a beautiful glitch. What about?
But I feel like I think there's that maybe Amanda and James could also speak to that.
I mean,
Go ahead, James.
You go ahead.
I just feel like these terms are so interconnected that it can like be hard to distinguish between them, and that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I mean, I think that almost like utopia is by definition sort of unattainable. So anything utopic will ultimately, any attempt to write utopia or to imagine utopia will probably necessarily I mean, I guess to go with Le Guin, what is the story, the who walks away from the town, the town is utopia, but one child has to be punished in the basement forever and ever and ever. And then
so that it can exist, and then the person who chooses to walk away from that utopia because it's tainted.
Yeah, exactly. And
because
I mean,
everybody knows that the child is, in there made to suffer.
And I think that I think that we see that in our own world. Like there's like a lot of people talk about like the future being unequitably distributed, which is true, like geographically, but also like people who are incredibly wealthy, like Jeff Bezos, I'm sure, is living a utopian life. The people who work at the Amazon fulfillment centers who are not allowed to unionize are paying the price for Jeff Bezos's utopia. So, I don't know. I think that the two things. Yeah, I don't think that the two things are ever meaningfully separable because somebody has to do the work to create the foundation for a utopia to be created, and yeah. And so, and the reality is, life's got to be hard. We have to share the hardship of life around so that life can be equitable, and that's the closest maybe thing to utopia that could be approached.
The title of that Le Guin is "Those Who Walk Away from Omelas." Thanks, Kai, who is there to fill us in on the right answer. But I also think that, like science fiction, like sound, one person's utopia is another person's dystopia. One person's sound that elicits wonderful feelings elicits feelings of not so wonderful in others, or I love this sound, I hate this sound, turn it off. I had a roommate who, anytime I would play something that was somewhat morose, would basically like be put into a panic, because it would really just elicit feelings that were too strong and would overwhelm her. I have a growling dog, I'm sorry. But with that, I wanted to ask maybe one last thing, is that writing is obviously a big part of this particular piece, and therefore being influenced by some writings is obviously something that will come into play. But what about the sounds? Are there any specific artists that influence, maybe not this particular work, but influence your works, your musical works or sonic works or explorations?
Can I ask Julia a question about sounds that people like and don't like? Because like, so it ends with like a sort of noise breakdown, and I as a fan of music, like, love noise. I don't know that we weren't as noisy, I think, in this iteration as we have been in the previous iterations, but like, did you see that the finale, Act 5, it ending with noise? Is that joyous noise or is that calamitous noise?
No, I think it's just a lot, like it's just noise. It's just like it's and then but it really ends with that the absence of the noise. So I mean, it's just like, but it's a mass of and yeah, and accumulation. It's dense, I suppose, and then yeah, it really ends with the moment after the noise. But and but I knew that it can't couldn't be too dystopic. I don't know, and I guess also it's totally subjective. Like I think, and I like that maybe it's not clear if it's utopic or dystopic, or if it's a happy ending or it's a brutal ending. But like when I invited Andrea to be a part of the project, she was very clear that she wouldn't like be able to use her talent as a hypnotherapist for something that was not like meant to, like was not for good, like I couldn't just like then leave people on like a really low note because it wouldn't be ethical.
Wow.
The hypnotist's Hippocratic oath.
Pretty much. I mean, okay, but musical inspirations, oh my gosh, I'm just not even prepared for this at all.
It doesn't have to be an artist, it can be a sound, a type of sound. How about that?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm sure that maybe James and Amanda are better at kind of listing off artists than I, but especially like this piece also drew from so many things, like minimal ambient music, drone, harsh noise, free jazz, and spoken like 80s spoken word. So yeah, the musical influences I would say are like extremely vast, and it's hard, really hard for me to especially for this project, which is just like really also meant to draw from also many things and be multi-dimensional experience. But actually, that's not true. If I had one thing, if I could say one thing that I did listen to that was kind of music was really early in the process of making this. These recordings by Black Quantum Futurism, and they have all of these time capsule recordings. There are quite a few of them, and I found them. Yeah, like somebody introduced them to me really at the time that I was working on this, and I was like, wow, if I could make something that like has this kind of time and rhythm, and of course the content is really strong and kind of takes you somewhere else. That was really that was like aspirational in some way.
And they're getting to be the first. They're like the first artist in residence at the Hadron Collider. Am I the only person who's read about this? Like Kamei and Rashida are going to the CERN to like be sound artist theorists in residence at the Hadron Collider, which is really cool. That's pretty sci-fi.
For sure.
That's great. Did you, Amanda or James, want to add anything about influences or things that you were thinking about musically when
I would say
on this?
Definitely the work of Ilian Radig, the huge inspiration for this composition, and like Coil also. I've been listening to so much Coil recently, just like Cozy Fanny 2D, always the Cocteau Twins. But yeah. That's all I got
I
off
mean-
the top of my head.
That's
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, in the sense of like blending free jazz and electronic musics in sort of interesting ways, like there's obviously like Miles Davis's like On the Corner, like 80s period, and like Marzette Watts was doing a lot of like synth and stuff that like he's a jazz figure, free jazz, experimental jazz figure who's like doing some of the same experimentations as like, well, not really the same, but he was interested in bringing electronic music into jazz and into free jazz and avant music in an interesting way, and so he's like always been an inspiration. Martine, I can't make a piece of art without revisiting Martine Sims' mundane Afrofuturist manifesto, which although I have not yet in my life been able to lay hands on it. Ostensibly, there is some audio recording. There's an album version of it, and her work. I actually just sent a new piece of hers that I discovered to Amanda and Julia this morning. But her work is like
So beautiful.
Yeah,
Super
it's just
nice. Listen to it this morning.
It's yeah. Anyways, Martine Sims. Everyone's got to check her out. She's the number one inspiration for me getting out of bed and making art, basically.
Wow.
But I would say another inspiration that maybe we didn't talk so much about, like I guess you'll see when the credits roll, but so many people contributed to this piece. Like I think the biggest inspiration, or I don't know, something that I felt was definitely present in the making of this piece was community and our respective shared communities, and like there's people who didn't perform in the live thing but did contribute, like that there's 6 or 7 people pretending to be those weren't, like doing choral exercises to create those. I don't know if am I allowed to tell people how the sausage was made?
Of course, I talk about the worm choir, my favorite thing.
Yeah. So there's all these people who participated in that. We got together in the studio and just like made weird sounds, and I think each other's energy really played into like what became of that, and in Act 2 as well, that was like performed by like a band with our dear friend Malcolm, whose voice pops up a bit later, and I think it's actually through Malcolm that I know Julia at all, and we started working together. So I think that I don't know. I think in a lot of ways, community is also our community of peers engaged in the music or sound art community in Montreal comes through in the piece and influenced a lot what the final product looked like, and was inspiring. And I think that it's anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
No, I totally agree with you.
it's a labor of love and community. We've been asked to wrap it up.
Get him off the air!
So I wanted to say thank you so much for sticking around and spending this time chatting with me. I hope my questions were not too menial to go through, but I've enjoyed learning a little bit about each of you, and especially that was my first experience of the piece. I was going to watch I watched the segment on the website, but I was like, that's the first time I heard it, so it was a really like great basically like a journey. It was very, very like encapsulating, and I was kind of sad when I had to come over here and set this up because I was like, I don't want to miss anything. But I'll be able to revisit it on the Facebook page and on the site. So thank you very much. We are going to go to a clip from a Constellation Records recording artist, Off World. We're gonna be playing Impulse Controller Predub.
And then there will be an interview with an artist who's playing on April 1st following the constellation video. So stay tuned to learn more about exciting music from Suoni.
Hi, my name is Amal Arulanandam. I am a Sri Lankan Canadian. I was born in Newfoundland, but grew up in Mississauga, Ontario. Now live in Toronto. I exist in kind of a couple of worlds here, in kind of the experimental music scene and new music scene, and as well as the kind of typical Western classical scene. I'm a really big metal fan, and I would say that was actually my first love as far as music went. That vibe and that atmosphere and just this kind of unbridled energy and emotion was really impactful for me, and I think it really kind of informed the way that I play and approach other styles of music, especially in classical music. I first discovered Julius Eastman's music through Isaac Goldschneider, who is one of the kind of co-presenters on this project. He runs Innovation en Concert in Montreal, and he invited me to perform this piece, but with the full 10 cello ensemble. And that was the first time I had heard Eastman's music, and I had heard of him as a composer. And it was really fascinating. It made me go and kind of explore more of what he did.
I am so glad that I was introduced to Eastman's work through this conversation. When I had a chance to read through his scores and listen to the music, I was able to see that a lot of the things he was exploring are things that only now a lot of mainstream artists are exploring. Like the idea of using that pop music structure into his composition to kind of draw people in, almost as the backbone, the engine, while the rest of his composition is built around it. I thought that was really, I found inspiring, because I see people have taken that on as a way of doing things without crediting Eastman as somebody who was taking that risk in the beginning. Amal, as a cellist, do you find that your intention is to follow Eastman's writing to the letter, or do you plan to improvise?
Yeah, so the thing that I read about his notation is that he was very inexact with how he would write, like how he would physically transcribe what he was thinking. Which again is interesting to me, because oftentimes minimalist music is so exact and precise. And I think it's more embodiment of this kind of rawness that he had about his music and his writing and just his perspective on things. The case of this specific piece is an interesting one, because if he wrote it down, which I assume he would have had to for his ensemble to play and record, all of that was lost or destroyed, or people were never able to find coherent copies of the score. So the version that I sent you is the only existing version of that score that was all transcribed from the recording that was made.
One of the things that I've experienced as a musician is, and I've done a lot of improvisational music, but more in the folkloric realm. And to me, part of the freedom quality of music is this ability to improvise, to like be music and to be it at any time in all ways. And I found it interesting, the parameters that some people with high levels of training have, what their relationship to improvisation is. And I'm wondering, in this realm of new music and the explorations that you've been making with your own practice and between heavy metal music, like what your relationship is to improvisation and how you feel about your relationship to improvisation.
I guess it depends on the context of the improvisation. I love improvising in different styles. And also just free form improvisation that isn't really rooted in a style. And it depends. For me, my first kind of foray into improvising was in a jazz context in school. And so it's interesting to me that like jazz has become such an academic art form now in the last few years. And so like a lot of harmonic rules and all sorts of things, and that was more scary for me than anything at the time, because it was just more of kind of like, okay, I have to fit within these constraints while I'm doing it. And then when I joined a rock band and started playing cello in a rock band and like got to kind of just mess around and write my own solos, that was like a more freeing form of improvisation. And then once I started really getting into new music, the whole idea of just free improvisation, and there are no limits to whatever, any sonic world, anything you want to convey, like whatever you're feeling and thinking. There's no wrong texture, wrong sound. It's just expression. That was really, really freeing. And I really do love existing in that world. And I've had more opportunities to do it in the last few years, and in the context of group improvisation. And but sometimes it's just nice to noodle around on my own too, and just kind of see whatever comes out. And I like kind of any little projects where I just get to kind of make sounds, and just, it's very freeing and it's very relaxing, and I find it's very just, it's almost like a reset button. It on my like mental state, and it can feel very cathartic too. I think it's something that, especially as a classical musician, we should get more used to doing, and just being in that world. I mean, I've gone to different places where I've done workshops with kids on improvisation, and one of the main things that we try to tell them is like, there's no bad sounds, there's no ugly sounds, there's no like, or sometimes like an ugly sound can be a good sound, and to just like trust your instincts and to just let things happen. Try to relinquish kind of that sense of control while you're doing this, and just kind of let whatever comes out comes out. And they always seem to feel a lot more like relaxed and happy after they realize that they don't have to fit into like a specific box when they're doing this. They can just kind of do whatever they want and be themselves in that moment.
Are you familiar with how familiar people who might be interested and invested in artists like Sun Ra and some of the contemporary African-American artists that have been doing more experimental music, and how well-known Eastman is in those circles? Or if he's also been, because of his association with new music, which is associated more with European-American culture and style, if he's been overlooked also, because it was my first introduction to him. I wasn't familiar with him in terms of experimental literary artists, photography artists of the time and era, or through the movement that really in the 90s with film work and the sole exploration of HIV/AIDS, like I hadn't been familiar with yet. Clearly, I don't know everything about every subject or artist or movement, but it feels exciting that if part of what you're doing, Amal, is introducing people who've been interested in Black experimental culture to also discover Eastman, who might not have been in their purview or in as many people's purview as it could be. Do you know what the situation is with his reputation in those circles?
I'm not entirely certain, but the impression that I got from reading more and more about him is that he tried to exist in all of these different spaces, like in the Western classical, Western new music world. And then also I think when he found that was essentially rejecting him, he got more heavily involved in like, I forget exactly which scene it was, but it was a really specific New York, like experimental music scene. But I don't think he really managed to make a huge name for himself there either. And the impression that I get is that he was existing in all of these spaces that weren't really having him at the time that he was alive, which just kind of further contributed to his spiraling into addiction and just health problems. And he was homeless for a period of time, and he would go in and out of being homeless, and just had a lot of mental health issues that came. I believe I remember reading that he ended up becoming schizophrenic, and there's a lot of things that contributed to him just not feeling like he had a place anywhere really to exist in a way that was comfortable, which for me, like obviously I've never struggled in the same way anywhere close to that, but that's something that I have felt personally in my kind of trajectory as a musician and as an artist, like finding a space where I felt like I fit in was not something that it was something that kind of eluded me until fairly recently as an artist. Like even just visually, you don't see a lot of South Asian classical musicians, right? And so I would go to concerts or go to events or go to donor events and be pretty much the only person of color there. And then even like amongst my own family and relatives, like I have a lot of very supportive family, but in general, our culture is not like embroiled in the Western classical thing, right? So it's not necessarily understood in the same way by like members of my family. And then professionally, it's always kind of felt weird too in all sorts of different circles. And so that kind of related to that a little bit in reading about him and his life. It was like, okay, yeah, I can understand kind of a portion of that, like trying to find your space or your where you belong in spaces that you weren't necessarily intended to be in. Yeah, sorry, I guess that that kind of went again. I went off on another little tangent there. I'm not 100% certain about how he ended up fitting in, but the impression I get is that he just didn't, and which is why even in those circles now, I guess people don't really know about him. But they should, because he did some great things. And again, for me, I think the most important thing was that they were honest things, and they were all, and they were very unique too. Like he took the language of minimalism in a very interesting direction, because his music was like very much rooted in like popular structures. But he had some just really dense, bizarre harmonies and things that so much tension there that like one of the things with Holy Presence of Jeanne d'Arc is that like the riff and the melodies are like quite simple, right? They happen for long periods of time, but just the textures end up being so thick, and there's all this tension and drama, and it's like hard to pick out exactly what's happening everywhere. And there's just it's minimal, but it's chaotic at the same time, which I think is very representative of his inner space, like going back to what you were talking about earlier.
Do you find there's something that might have some resonance with South Asian classical music that feels homely to you when you hear Eastman's?
I'm not sure. So it's interesting. I regret this now, but I don't have as much of a connection with my own culture as I would like, because growing up, we grew up in a very westernized household. Being born in Canada, I guess on my mother's side of things, a lot of this, I guess, boils down to a combination of class and colonialism kind of rooted together. So in Sri Lanka, my mother's family was a more like upper middle class family, and they also had more ties with the British. And so they grew up in a more Western sort of way. It was like a hybrid kind of household, I think. And my dad's family was more lower class. They were a poor family, and they were more rooted in traditional Sri Lankan culture. But then when they came here, and I think they lived in the UK for a little while too before moving to Canada and having us, my sister and I. But I guess fitting in Western culture was really important for them, and also being in a place like Newfoundland where everyone was very welcoming of them, but they were still the only brown people there in this tiny town of like maybe a few thousand people. We spoke English at home. I listened to Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was a lot of that, right? And so It's only in the last few years that I've really started to listen to more of like the traditional music from Sri Lanka Carnatic music, and so I don't know if I would say I have a deep enough connection to it to draw a parallel to what I was hearing with Eastman. At least that wasn't an association that I made when I heard that.
Speaking on that, what type of an impact do you think introducing this music will have on people that share the same cultural background as Eastman?
A lot of what is important to people is realizing that they're not alone in their struggles, and they're not alone in the position of life they happen to be in. Like there are other people sharing this experience with them. And I think that alone can feel just like a little bit uplifting, which maybe could be enough to help people work towards kind of somehow trying to get out of that situation, or trying to not feel as if everything is quite so fatal at that moment. And representation is really important, right? We hear that word a lot now, and especially in something like classical music, Western music, minimalist music, just seeing that representation could be enough for someone to feel like, okay, maybe I have a place here. My like, speaking specifically about him as a gay Black man existing in this, being like, this music is here. Maybe I have a place as a gay person, as a Black person, as a visible minority. Like I belong here. I belong somewhere. Like it's not. It can maybe help someone or help people feel like they have a place that they can exist in, a space that they can exist in. I hope. And that's kind of important, because that's what we all want, right? We want a space for ourselves, a space where we can exist in and be safe in, but a space that's not isolated.
Amal, I was interested in what your observations or what you've noticed about contemporary Canadian music, new Canadian music, and if you were, for those of us who are less familiar with it, how, because I'm assuming that not everybody that watches this is going to be familiar with the genre. I'm hoping that this interview will bring in audiences that are going to discover part of what you're offering. I'm hoping this is what the expansive quality and the marketing outreach of this program will be. But I'm wondering if you're hearing a sound that's emerging through these contemporary Canadian composers that you're playing, that you could distinguish from others, perhaps.
One of the things that I've enjoyed so much about getting to work with and meet young Canadian composers from all around the country is that there is no one sound. Everyone's kind of creating their own voice with what they're doing compositionally. I guess you could say in some ways there's like a Montreal sound that's very rooted in the Pierre Boulez, IRCAM, acousmatic and electroacoustic kind of thing. But even there, I think people are really taking the idea of having an individual voice very seriously. And the other thing, I touched on this earlier, what I really like is there are a lot of people composing in a Western classical style from different cultures and backgrounds now. And I would hesitate to call a lot of new music Western music now because of how many influences are coming from their cultures into the music that they're writing. Like, it may be notated in a Western style to help facilitate performers who are trained in Western classical music to play the work, but at its core, it's rooted in their own traditional experiences and their own culture, which is great. Like composer colleague of mine, Juro Kim, is a Filipino composer, and a lot of his music, all of his music is very, very inspired by traditional Filipino music, but it's notated in a Western style, so Western performers can play it. But for him, it's very, very important that we stay true to a lot of the textures and sounds that are that happen in traditional Filipino music. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that, which is good, because I think it's now becoming this blending of styles where people are they're able to represent themselves and represent their culture unabashedly in a way without feeling constrained. I think we're moving in that direction. It's not quite there yet, but I think things are moving there, especially in Canadian new music. I think there's still a lot of work to do, and there's still pockets of, or there's still barriers in place for those composers and for those people that prevent them from getting opportunities that they should get, or being in places that they should be, because we still have structures in place that are inherently oppressive in that way. But I feel like this generation of composers and going forward, like, we're moving in a direction where hopefully that won't be the case.
Well, building on that, Amal, I was wondering about what is your process as far as not only uplifting the composers, but uplifting other musicians of color who may feel like a connection to the music that's being written that may not have access to performing in some of the larger orchestras that you have across the country, but they may feel that the work in the music is important. Do you have any process of reaching out to finding people that may be kindred spirits, that are fellow cellists or other types of musicians?
It's hard to say. I think, especially here, we're so few and far between. There was a colleague of mine who's a wonderful violinist. I think she's actually based now on the West Coast, Parmala Taravali, and she's Western classical trained violinist, but also really heavily influenced by traditional Indian music, and does a lot of like violin and dance stuff. And I think one of the reasons she left Toronto is so she could focus on that and be rid of these like traditional Western classical structures that had been like largely oppressive to her for so many years, both being a person of color and a woman in the Western classical orchestral world. And she spearheaded this meeting through Orchestras Canada that was supposed to kind of touch on the idea of diversity in orchestras and what we need, our experiences, and what we need to do to improve that. And she, along with a number of other people, reached out to as many classical musicians of color as they could find, and there weren't many across the country. I could probably count on maybe two sets of hands the number that we managed to get collectively across Canada. But I feel like continuing to present us in the foreground will provide that representation. A lot of the time, at least what I've found in my own experience, is that this kind of music is not inherently part of our own culture. And I know in my experience, it's often looked down upon to be a musician, or to be especially a classical musician. And if there are more of us kind of in focus, in the spotlight, it will allow someone from these cultures who may be interested in it to feel like it's okay if I do this. Like, there's someone else doing it at a high level that is like me, or that may have a similar experience. Like, I may have a similar experience. I can do this too. And I think just even providing that visibility is really important to helping people. Like, no one should be forced into thinking that this music is like a higher art form, or that they need to be participating in it. But if someone wants to, they shouldn't feel like they don't have the option or the ability, or that they don't have a place there.
Have you had thoughts on And are you able to share them? And clearly, it's not your responsibility as a musician to be an advocate for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, in addition to the skills you bring to the music. But, you know, in these conversations around the gatekeeping of culture and who and how we're represented, have you seen signs of life, or are there ways that you could see a shift happen more readily and with more momentum than it's happening in your field? Or is there ways that you would like to help activate that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that especially now we do, as artists, we do have a responsibility to help promote equity and social justice and those things as part of our art, as part of our practice as artists. Because, I mean, a lot of people try to say don't politicize art, and I think that's silly because most art is inherently political. And I think for myself, this is only something that I've really come to grasp in the last few years, and I definitely have strides to make in being a better advocate and being more active in that way. But I think it's just, at least in this world of art music, bringing more people of color into the structures that have been oppressing them or keeping them down for so long is a good first step. Like just including them in boards, in administrative positions, in decision-making positions, in anything. One of the things that I find most silly often is when when organizations have divisions for cultural outreach with nobody from those cultures on those panels, which is absurd to me, because how are you supposed to know how to reach out to those groups properly and in a way that's not offensive and demeaning and coming from a savior complex if you don't have people from those groups helping and spearheading those initiatives, right? And even just that, I think, it hasn't happened in a way that is it hasn't happened in a significant way yet, especially in a colleague of mine refers to it as big classical, so like the large organizations. It hasn't happened in a meaningful way yet. And I think that's a good first step to take, and they should take it. You should take it, guys. Take it.
I agree. I think personally, I feel like change through mentorship is a way that structures can be changed. So do you have any plans of bringing along any other musicians, composers of color that may have some of the same struggles that you've had, to be able to uplift them?
Yep. So I recently joined the board of Music Works magazine here, and that's kind of a big part of what they would like to do and what we would like to do as a board is feature more artists from these underrepresented groups more prominently, and especially now trying to expand like the digital outreach, because so many people can have access to so many things online now, and it's such an effective way of disseminating information and awareness. So that's one way, and then through some other organizations I'm part of, like Thin Edge New Music, just more mindful programming going forward, I think is also important in just any arts organization. Mindful programming, just being careful with how you're conducting your outreach. I've seen many times going into a place, like I used to work for Regent Park School of Music here in Toronto, which has a large community of young Black and brown children. And I've definitely seen people come in on a like an outreach trip that didn't seem more like a, hey, you're invited to be part of this, and more of like, hey, we're doing you a favor by being here. and like imposing this upon you kind of thing, right? And so, yeah, I think I don't have anything concrete, I think, at the moment yet, but this is what we're working towards, especially being part of this board and with these organizations.
It sounds to me like you're being not just careful, but mindful and courageous. So I want to raise my hands to you for that and say, I'm glad you're here doing this work and carrying all that you carry and bringing what you bring. Picking up what you're laying down, Amal.
Thank you.
Amal, we want to take this time to thank you for being so open to share not only your own experience, but how this experience can impact the lives of the people who watch this performance. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both. It was my pleasure. And it was really great getting to meet both of you on this interview.
Well, I'm glad that I could be here with you, the two of you, and the brilliant set you carry. And I want to thank the watchers and the listeners, the people who spent part of their life in this conversation with us, and just really acknowledge their presence, the value for which is why we're doing this work. So thank you for joining us, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.